Hi, my name is Will. I'm a believer in Jesus Christ, and I celebrate victory over chemical dependency since February 13th of 2016, and I currently struggle with anger and anxiety. I was born in May of '79 in Tennessee. I spent my early childhood with my father. I lost contact with my mom when I was 8, so I didn't really know her. My dad was a naval corpsman, and the fact that he took care of me by himself for almost 6 years while in the military is commendable. However, when I was 6, my dad remarried and my life became chaos. My stepmom was an alcoholic with a pill problem. She was physically and mentally abusive and very negligent of my step-siblings and I. My dad wasn't around much because he was incarcerated for some pretty terrible things, and I was left in the care of this terrible woman. The only good thing that happened in the following years as I learned about Christ and God's love for me through a vacation Bible school at the church down the road from the strangers that stepped up to take us in during one of my stepmom's visits to detox. I loved that he loved me, and I asked to be saved. That was the best part of my childhood. I wouldn't have survived childhood without him. Even though I would grow to resent him, the fact that I knew he was there made me feel less alone. Eventually, my stepmom admitted me into a children's behavioral hospital, and I was placed into foster care. My dad would send me all these letters that he was going to get me when he got out of prison. And so I did my best to try and cope with the situation I was in. I was turning 10 years old when I went to the group home for the first time. 6 months later, I was in another psych hospital. I didn't understand what was going on, but I knew that my dad was going to get me soon enough and that this craziness would be over, and that never happened. My dad did not come back for me, and the craziness never ended. My dad got out of prison, left North Carolina where we lived, and went to Florida to stay with the woman that abused me for so many years and had thrown me into foster care. He knew what had gone on there. Why would he do that? The Department of Social Services, called DSS, told me that I couldn't go home until my dad took counseling for the things he was incarcerated for. And he refused, claiming he didn't do what he was convicted of, so he shouldn't have to. He just left me there, and I felt alone, discarded, abandoned. That thought would go from sadness to contempt and eventually to rage. He said he was coming to get me. He would do anything to get me. And he said he loved me. Man, all those letters. By adolescence, I had a rising hatred towards him. But in so many ways, I never stopped being that little 11-year-old waiting on him to come get me. I needed him to want me. I needed to see I was valuable. I needed for him to love me, and because that didn't happen, I never learned to love me either. By the time I reached high school, my perception of our Heavenly Father wasn't much different than the perception of my dad. He left me too. He didn't care about me either. If he did, I wouldn't have moved over a dozen times in 8 years. I wouldn't have been abandoned by my dad. I would have had a great childhood like all the other kids. I wouldn't have grown up being ashamed of myself because I was a foster kid. I was going to take care of myself from now on. I could do it. I didn't need my dad, and I didn't need God. I was labeled as violent with explosive tendencies by DSS. It was hard finding homes for me. I wasn't raised, I was cared for. I remember when I was about 12, I looked at my stuff packed up in garbage bags once again, and I said to myself, don't unpack, you won't be anywhere long. When I was in 6th grade, the teacher asked what we wanted to be when we got older. And I said, I wanted to be a homeless guitar player in New York. When asked why I would say that, I replied, if I don't aim high, I won't be disappointed. I had started using weed and alcohol when I was 16, and while I may have had a foster family or two that really did care for me, I couldn't see it. I hurt everyone who tried to get close to me. I was convinced no one would ever love me. Now I see how much foster parents get paid and what that actually covers, and I feel so bad for what I had done to some of these people. I was truly my own worst enemy. I was given my GED at 17 and basically kicked out of foster care. I went to live with my dad, but I lacked any real connection to him and didn't stay there long. I basically came into adulthood, made a lot of bad, uneducated decisions, and chased what I had come to think love was from all those around me. I felt worthless and empty and thought that if people liked me, I could like me too. I was a people pleaser and was very codependent. I had several terrible toxic relationships. I got married to one when I was 18 because she was pregnant. It didn't last long, and it was a brutal separation. I was cut off from my son. I hopped a bus to Tampa, Florida to get away from the chaos that was seeking to kill me, and found myself actually doing well despite developing the drug habit. I found myself in another toxic relationship, and once again I became a father. When my daughter was born, she weighed 2 pounds and 9 ounces. She was born 2 months early. I didn't stay with her mom, but I did have custody of her. I struggled off and on for 4 years before I decided to join the Army. Unfortunately, I couldn't do it as a single father without a support system. I married her mom and hoped that living a respectable and financially stable lifestyle would change our lives altogether, and it didn't. I was so naive, and my marriage was a farce. I really didn't have any concept of what a healthy family looked like. I was kind of winging it, and I was failing miserably. I joined the military and became a psychiatric technician. Somehow, I felt like I could find a way to escape the scars of my past through counseling others. I could fix me. I could learn what a healthy relationship looked like. I was actually really good at my job, and I enjoyed it immensely, but I did not learn how to fix my life. The lack of stability in my personal life became instability in my occupational life, and I was eventually diagnosed ADHD and bipolar major depressive. I was prescribed Adderall for my ADHD and several other meds for bipolar. I started to abuse them, and my career started coming to an end. I had hoped to retire from the military and was instead medically discharged, and I was a civilian again. After several years, my marriage fell apart. My ex-wife started hanging out with some really bad people, and when she left, they didn't. I started using IV methamphetamines, and everything I had disappeared, to include my 12-year-old daughter. She was my rock. What emotional stability I had was tied to the fact I had her, and now she was gone. I jumped into another toxic relationship with another IV user, and my daughter spent her adolescence in foster care. I was so lost and feeling sorry for myself, I had forgot about my own child. How ironic. The thing I had hated my dad so much for, I was now doing myself. Maybe God was trying to teach me something. After 2 years of living in a downward spiral, I didn't have any real friends and no one I could trust. I sought after drugs so bad that every hit was potentially my last. My new lifestyle was going to kill me. Through the grace of God, I lived. Here I was trying to show God that I can survive without him, and instead I was at my bitter end. I feared his rejection, but it was overshadowed by accepting that I was going to die if I didn't try. I surrendered that day with my head against that cold steel jail cell door. You could say I went straight to step 3. I gave my will and my life over to the care of God. Now, whether I chose to or I felt I had no choice was debatable, but I can say that making that decision to surrender my life and will over to his care was the start of a new life, my new life. Admitting I was powerless was easy. I spent my whole life feeling like a victim. Coming to believe that God could restore me to sanity was scary. Hoping he would want to was even scarier. Was he going to suddenly start caring about me? And I started praying. I prayed for help. I prayed for guidance and strength. I prayed for restoration. Most of all, I prayed for deliverance. Why do I do the things I do? And why do I hate myself so much? Why can't I be happy? He responded, and what's even better, I heard him. I started coming to Celebrate Recovery in May 2015. I had spent my whole life believing God exists, Celebrate Recovery taught me that God had so much more to offer than to just exist. God is a means to a better life, but I didn't understand yet that better doesn't mean it would be the life that I wanted. Life had left a lot of scars and a very mixed interpretation to what God was. When I had seen the people around me in CR praising the Lord for saving them, for loving them, for forgiving them, I thought I must be missing something. The Lord died for me, washed away my sins, and now I am forgiven. I was on probation, and DCF still had my daughter, so someone must not have told them. Also, did knowing God loves me mean that I could love myself? I left rehab, and DCF returned my daughter home after a long 2.5 years. Unfortunately, I also left CR and NA. Things were still falling in place, so I thought I was fine. I figured I'd just smoke some K2 and be fine. It wouldn't come up on a drug screen, so I started using again in August of 2015, and for 6 months I was back to doing what I always did. I slid back into my comfort zone and consequently further from God. I was still so self-destructive. Something was different though, and things didn't feel right. The life I had lived for so long felt foreign and wrong, and the more I pursued it, the worse I felt. I found myself asking, why was I doing this? And that's when I realized that I never stopped being that kid waiting for his dad to get out of prison and get him. I never really grew up. I had been wasting my life trying to make it from one place to another till someone rescued me. It was then I knew that God had done just that. It was time for me to live my life, and God showed me I was worth a life so much better than what I was giving myself. I returned to Celebrate Recovery in February of 2016, and I let go and let God. I had a lot of fear towards what that may look like, but this program and the people in it were there to help me. I found out that surrender was so empowering. My life verse, I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me, Philippians 4:13, became my mantra. DCF closed their case in May 2016, and my probation was completed successfully in August. I was seeing the Lord's plan for me unfolding. I was watching lives being changed all around me. I gave myself and my will over to Him and trusted Him to give me a new life, and it turned into a journey that I could have never imagined. I am a new creation in Him, and I will no longer conform to the world I once knew. Romans 12:2 says, do not conform to the pattern of this world, but be transformed by the renewing of the mind. Well, I had been transformed. Through the Celebrate Recovery program, I have been freed from the chains of my past, and the Lord has become my strong foundation. He is the ground in which I am planted, and this program is my fertilizer. I guess you could call it Miracle Grow. Step 3 and Step 11 are steps I take daily. They are my favorite steps. Step 3 is what I do in the morning, and Step 11 is what I do at night. I surrender my life and will to God, and He empowers me through prayer and meditation with the strength and wisdom I need to know His will for me. In 2019, His will for me took me somewhere I so unknowingly, desperately needed to go. You see, the Lord never stops working. In 2015, I had a lot of very unpleasant things to say to my dad. I told him how he made me feel, and I said it in a way that I hoped would hurt, and I abandoned him. I got clean right after that, and I didn't speak to him for 2 years. I do feel like not having those emotions to deal with and keeping him out of my life helped me stay clean long enough to recover and find some direction. In 2018, after 2 years clean, the Lord moved me to reach out to him. I shot him a text. I apologized, not for what I said, but how I said it. I was at a point in my life where I was healthy enough to deal with these emotions. Plus, I had the Lord's strength now. He was on his way to the hospital when I texted him. He had had his first stroke. I don't believe in coincidences. For a year after that, we texted. He didn't ever want to call. I felt like he was giving me space, knowing how much I was hurt by him. However, after a year of texting, he told me he needed me to come to South Carolina and take him to the hospital. When I got to South Carolina, I walked into his house, seeing him for the first time in 3 years. He looked like death. He was 130 pounds at 6'1". He could barely speak or walk. I took him to the hospital and they admitted him. They said that he had had another stroke. He could no longer care for himself. The hospital couldn't keep him that long though, and his criminal record kept him from being able to go to any assisted living facility. I struggled with what to do. I prayed. Then I moved him into my house. My wife and I made many adjustments and had to devote a lot of time to his care. He needed help with everything. I showed him the grace that the Lord has shown me. I was able to forgive him, and know that I was able to find love for my dad again. I was so glad that God gave me the opportunity to spend some time with him. I came to realize that my dad has always loved me. It wasn't that he was trying to hurt me. He just wasn't a good father. I don't even know that he knew how to be. I needed to see that. Now I had gotten the deliverance that I had prayed for so long ago. In November 2019, after 6 months and several more hospital stays, my dad died. I had thought for so many years that I wouldn't care if my dad died. I thank the Lord that I was there. He always knows what's best for me. He's always got a plan. Now I've been clean and coming to Celebrate Recovery for over 4 years. I have met some amazing people here, my wife being one of them. We even got married at Celebrate Recovery. I've been a leader at CR for almost 4 years. I am a happy husband, a better father, and now an expecting father. Ian Edward Bridge is due September 27th of 2020. Life is so fulfilling when you are living it for the Lord and following His will. Now I get to share my testimony with others and pray that it helps them to find Jesus too. I have grown so much in both my life and in my relationship to the Lord, and I'm so grateful for all the Lord has carried me through. I show that gratitude through service, and I encourage others to do the same. I thank Him the most for making His presence in my life so obvious, making my job much easier. As a believer, my job is to bring people to Him, help others believe in His grace and His mercy so that they can find freedom like I have. If you're struggling, I want you to know He is listening. Remember, the Lord loves you not for who you are, but for who He is. It doesn't matter where you've been or what you've done. What He's done for me, He can do for anyone. Be honest, be open-minded, be willing. Thank you for letting me share my story.